Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. Indian troops have martyred 2 more civilians in occupied Kashmir. The occupation forces targeted the youths during a cordon and search operation in the Ranbir area of Srinagar. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 355 days. Kabul says Afghan forces have killed 16 Taliban in 2 separate operations in Herat and Takhar provinces. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the fighters were planning to attack Afghan military posts in Zavol and Baharak districts. The Taliban have not yet responded to Kabul's claims. The US has reported 1,157 COVID-19 deaths and over 73,000 cases in the last 24 hours. The total number of infections in the country has surpassed 4.1 million, with nearly 146,000 deaths. In Brazil, 1,156 more people have died from the virus, increasing the tally to over 85,000. Meanwhile, Pakistan has recorded 24 deaths overnight, taking the toll to 5,787, with nearly 272,000 cases. Worldwide, the death count has exceeded 638,000, while cases top 15.6 million. A Singaporean man has pleaded guilty to conducting espionage in the US for Chinese intelligence. In a statement, US Justice Department said Jun Wei Yo entered a guilty plea in a Washington court to 1 charge of operating illegally as a foreign agent. Jun admitted to using his political consultancy to collect information for Beijing between 2015 and 2019. And in cricket, England will resume their first innings of the 3rd Test against West Indies at Old Trafford. The hosts are at 258 for 4, with half-centuries from Oli Pope, Rory Burns and Joss Buttler. For West Indies, Kemar Roach picked 2 wickets, while Ruston Chased picked 1. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, the United States has reported 1,557 COVID-19 deaths and over 73,000 cases in the last 24 hours. The total number of infections in the country has surpassed 4.1 million, with nearly 146,000 deaths. In Brazil, 1,156 more people have died from the virus, increasing the tally to over 85,000. Worldwide, the death count has exceeded 638,000, while cases top 15.6 million. More details in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic is accelerating rapidly, especially in the regions of Americas, Far East and South Africa. Mexico City's mayor has warned of a second wave of coronavirus as the cases top 370,000, with the total deaths crossing 42,000. The cases began to level off in mid-June, but recent numbers raise fears of a rebound of infections. In the US, the White House has pushed on its stance of reopening schools amid the pandemic. It said children should go back to school even if it turns out they are transmitting the deadly virus.
There have also been few reports of children being the primary source of COVID-19 transmission among family members. That's where the data currently stands. But that being said, even if there is transmission and later studies come out, let's say, we believe that students should be going back to school because the effect on a child, we know scientifically, they are not affected in the same way as an adult.
France has tested its water waste from the Paris sewage system once more after traces of COVID-19 were found in it at the end of June. But researchers said it did not show a surge of COVID-19 infection. Meanwhile, in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said we'll be past coronavirus by mid-2021, but warned of tough times ahead.
I think that by the middle of next year, we will be well on the way. We will be well on the way past it. But I must be clear with people. I do still think that we have tough times ahead in keeping this virus under control, and we have tough times ahead in coming through economically.
Elsewhere, mainland China has reported 34 new cases, all of which were domestically transmitted. South Korea has reported 113 new cases in the past 24 hours, which is its first daily jump above 100 in nearly 4 months. The country is struggling to contain a spike in fresh virus transmissions since early May, when it eased social distancing rules.
While in Pakistan, 24 more people have died from the new coronavirus in the past day, raising the total to 5,787. The Health Ministry said 1,487 new cases were reported overnight as the tally crossed 271,000. Officials said over 236,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. The ministry said there are now over 29,000 active cases in the country. Sindh remains worst-hit province with over 116,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 91,000 cases. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, the affected tally is over 33,000, while there are over 11,000 cases in Balochistan. The capital city, Islamabad, has reported close to 15,000 cases, while Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan have nearly 4,000 cases. Indian troops have martyred 2 more civilians in the occupied Kashmir. The occupation forces targeted the youths during a cordon and search operation in the Ranbirgarh area of the Srinagar. The troops have sealed all entry and exit points of the area. Indian atrocities in the occupied territories have sharply increased despite the COVID-19 outbreak. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 355 days. Kabul says Afghan forces have killed 16 Taliban in 2 separate operations in Herat and Takhar provinces. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the fighters were planning to attack Afghan military posts in Zavol and Baharak districts. The ministry said Taliban's deputy shadow governor for Zavol, Mullah Wafa, was killed in the raid, while 13 others were also wounded. It said in Takhar, 3 others and including 1 commander were wounded in the operation. The Taliban have not yet responded to Kabul's claims. U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan, Zalmay Khalilzad, says the intra-Afghan talks have never been as close as they are now. Speaking at a virtual event organized by the U.S. Institute of Peace, Khalilzad said the war has left huge burdens on the United States, Afghanistan and the world community. Khalilzad said the negotiations are a defining moment for Afghanistan as well as the region. He said casualties among the Afghan military personnel and civilians have been reduced this year as compared to last year. The envoy said Washington is committed to reducing troops in Afghanistan, but it will be conditional. Now, a Singaporean man has pleaded guilty to conducting espionage in the U.S. for Chinese intelligence. In a statement, the United States Justice Department said John Wei Yo entered a guilty plea in a Washington court to 1 charge of operating illegally as a foreign agent. It said John used the consultancy to access and pay U.S. military and government employees with high-level security clearances. In a statement submitted to the court, he admitted using his political China has urged Germany not to yield to the U.S. pressure to take sides in the ongoing tensions between Washington and Beijing. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said Washington is creating an ideological confrontation and openly threatening other countries to pick sides. After a virtual meeting with Wang, German counterpart Heiko Maas said Berlin deems Beijing as an important partner as well as a competitor. Meanwhile, Russia said Moscow and Beijing are striving to cement ties for stability and security in the world. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said U.S. statement is a try to create a wedge in Sino-Russian ties. She said Washington's provoking tensions with Beijing is detrimental not only to them but to the overall international situation. This comes a day after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called for the creation of an anti-China alliance. Russia says the UK and US accusations regarding its anti-satellite weaponry tests are a distortion of the truth. In a statement, the Defense Ministry says the tests did not endanger other spacecrafts. The ministry said the country's July 15 test did not violate any principles of international law. It said the UK and the US are accusing Russia to justify their weapons development in the space. This comes after US State Department said Russian satellite actually appears to be in orbit anti-satellite weaponry. The UK Space Directorate also expressed concern over the tests and said the Russian satellite had the characteristics of a weapon. The US and Russia are to hold bilateral talks on space security in Vienna next week, the first since 2013. Now, Israel says its army helicopters have struck military targets in southern Syria. The Defense Ministry said the military carried out strikes in retaliation for the earlier munitions fired from Syria towards Israel. The ministry said a number of targets were struck, including Syrian army's observation posts and intelligence collection system. Syria's state media said Israeli helicopters targeted 3 outposts in its southern Quneitra area with anti-tank guided missiles. No casualties have been reported so far. The strikes come hours after the America's top General Mark Milley made an unannounced visit to Israel for talks on regional security. Israeli police have arrested 55 citizens for protesting near Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence in West Jerusalem. Thousands of demonstrators are venting their anger out against their premier's mishandling of the coronavirus crisis and corruption. In a statement, the police said the arrests were made on the charges of causing public disturbance. It said that the police dispersed the protesters to restore the public order. Wearing protective masks, protesters chanted slogans and demanded Netanyahu's ouster. The demonstration started last month and police have arrested around 100 protesters over the past 2 weeks. Well, now moving on, the UN Security Council has approved a request by the Libyan government of national accord to hold a session of the Sanctions Committee. Libya's envoy to the UN, Tahir al-Sani, said the session will be held at the end of July over violations of the arms embargo. The request comes as part of the GNA efforts to uncover countries that have provided support to militias. Meanwhile, the US military says Russia is breaching the UN arms embargo by continuously supporting its Wagner mercenaries in Libya. In a statement, US Africa Command said there is mounting evidence from satellite pictures of Moscow's cargo planes bringing supplies to Russian fighters. The Security Council imposed an open-ended embargo on Libya in 2011 to stop supplies of arms and military equipment to and from the country. Iraq says 4 rockets struck a military base used by US-led coalition troops south of Baghdad. In a statement, the military said the rockets hit Besmaya base and caused material damage, but no casualties. In recent months, a number of rocket attacks hit bases hosting coalition forces and landed near the US embassy in Baghdad. The United States blames Iran-backed militia groups, but no group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. In March, 2 Americans and 1 British soldier were killed following a barrage of rockets on Camp Taji. Now, Iran has accused the US of risking a disaster after an American warplane's flyby of an Iranian civilian airline led to a change altitude. In a tweet, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said the US harassed a scheduled civil airliner and endangered innocent passengers. State media reported several passengers were injured in the flight maneuver, but the US military said the jet was at a safe distance. The plane belonging to Mahan Air was heading from Tehran to Beirut at the time. Earlier, Iran's foreign ministry said it will take political and legal measures after an investigation into the incident. Minister of Urban Development Mohammed Eslami said Tehran has lodged a complaint with the International Civil Aviation Organization. Turkey has condemned statements by Greek officials and a flag-burning protest after Islamic prayers were held in Istanbul's Hagia Sophia. Foreign Ministry said Greece showed its enmity towards Islam and Turkey using Hagia Sophia mosque prayers as an excuse. Turkey held congregational Friday prayers yesterday at the Hagia Sophia mosque for the first time in 86 years. Far-right Greek extremists burned Turkish flags to protest the reopening of the mosque for worshippers. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis called the Turkish move a sign of weakness and a violation of cultural heritage.
What is unfolding in Constantinople today is not a demonstration of strength, a proof of weakness. They do not have the power to dim the brightness of this monument that is part of the world's cultural heritage.
Greece and Turkey disagree on a range of issues from airspace to maritime zones and ethnically split Cyprus. Well, now, moving on, Ethiopia says it has attained the first-year target of filling the Nile River Dam amid talks to quell tensions with Sudan and Egypt. In a news briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesman Dina Mufti said the successful dam filling boosted Ethiopia's credibility on the international arena. He said Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia have reached a common understanding on the issue. The spokesman said it was a victory for all the three neighbors. Last Tuesday, the leaders of the three countries met virtually as part of continued negotiations on the operation of the Ethiopian Grand Renaissance Dam. The African Union started facilitating the trilateral talks in June after the US-sponsored negotiations collapsed in February. Moving on, the US has begun talks with Japan about deploying mobile American Marine units in Okinawa. In an interview, U.S. Marine Corps Commandant General David Burgess said armed units will work closely with Japanese forces. The commandant said the deployment will prevent any potential adversary from taking the next move. Earlier in March, Burgess published Force Design 2030, plan to trim aircraft numbers, dump most cannon artillery and cut heavy armor. Now, this comes as Washington have accused Beijing of using the coronavirus pandemic to further territorial claims in the South China Sea. Beijing insists its intentions in the region are peaceful and has accused Washington of trying to drive a wedge between countries in Asia. The US will reinterpret a Cold War-era arms pact between 34 nations to allow defense contractors to sell more drones to allies. The White House said President Trump has decided to invoke U.S. national discretion to revamp the drone export policy. Under this change, the drones flying under 800 kilometers per hour will be considered in a lower category. The measure will allow export of U.S. drones to less stable governments that were forbidden from buying them under the Missile Technology Control Regime. In a statement, U.S. State Department spokesperson Megan Oshiger said Washington remains committed to the agreement. The 33-year-old MTCR treaty classifies large drones as cruise missiles, resulting in reapprovals due to high export restrictions. Well, now the U.S. prosecutors have unveiled charges against 18 Portland protesters arrested this week in a federal clampdown on the demonstrators. In a press release, U.S. Justice Department said the charges include assaults on officers, destruction of property, looting, arson and vandalism. The release said the charges stem from 3 days of violence between 20th and 22nd of July. It said the federal court released all 18 defendants pending jury trials or other follow-up court proceedings. The Justice Department said U.S. Marshal Service and the Federal Protective Service are jointly investigating the cases. Earlier, the White House deployed federal agents to Oregon, where anti-racism protests have been going on for 58 straight days. Meanwhile, Britain says that about 30 million people in the country are to be offered the flu vaccine this year. In a statement, the government said this will prepare for the winter that can see the annual flu season coincide with a surge in coronavirus. The statement said the traditional flu program will include all people over the age of 50 for the first time and the people they live with. It said children in their first year of secondary school will also be offered the vaccine. Plans for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have not yet been announced yet. Social distancing and hygiene measures are in place to stop coronavirus from having an impact on the amount of flu going around. Meanwhile, in Hungary, thousands of protesters have taken to the streets of Budapest against perceived government attacks on media freedom. 3 editors and more than 80 journalists of an online media outlet resigned after its owner refused to reinstate chief editor Szabolcs Dál. Now, the Dál's dismissal has increased concern that Prime Minister Viktor's nationalist government is intensifying efforts to muzzle critical voices. Foreign Minister Peter said his government was facing untrue accusations with respect to threats to media freedoms.
I have to listen to these false accusations all the time, and I always ask, tell me a concrete case. When could a journalist in Hungary not write what they thought? Which law prevents the press from being free in Hungary? There is no such law, and nobody has a reply for this question.
Well, now the Greek officials have announced that a wildfire raging in its 3rd day southwest of Athens has begun to die down. The blaze has been brought under control by a large deployment of over 300 firefighters and 90 fire engines. Fire brigade chief said that the overall status of the situation has improved. The official added that the special disaster management units were operating in highly inaccessible areas where the flames had spread. Meanwhile, 2 new fires broke out on Friday near the town of Keratia in the East Attica and in the southern region of Peloponnese. However, the Keratia wildfire is relatively low risk for nearby residents as it broke out in an area of low vegetation. Well, now more than 40 countries have accused North Korea of illicitly breaching a UN cap on refined petroleum imports. They filed a complaint to the UN Security Council's Sanctions Committee for North Korea. In December 2017, the UN imposed an annual cap of 500,000 barrels in a bid to cut off fuel for North Korea's nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles program. But the complaint said Pyongyang imported more than 1.6 million barrels of refined petroleum via 56 illicit tanker deliveries in the first 5 months of this year. The countries, including the US, UK and France, called for an immediate halt to deliveries until the end of the year. North Korea has been subjected to UN sanctions since 2006 over its nuclear and ballistic missile program. Now, Russia has hailed a World Trade Organization ruling on the European Union's anti-dumping measures. Moscow had filed a complaint against EU anti-dumping measures in 2016. Russian Economy Minister Maxim said the ruling would improve access for Russian goods to the EU market. Meanwhile, Moscow's WTO negotiator Maxim said the bloc must reconsider its anti-dumping tariffs on imports of Russian pipes and fertilizers. Earlier, the WTO panel found that the EU cost adjustment methodology violates the trading body's anti-dumping rules. Both sides have 60 days to appeal the decision in the case. And in cricket now, England have resumed their first innings of the 3rd Test match against West Indies at Manchester's Old Trafford. The hosts ended the day 1 at 258 for 4 after half-centuries from Oli Pope, Rory Burns and Jos Buttler. England were reduced to 122 for 4 before Pope and Buttler shared an unbeaten 136-run stand to put the hosts in a commanding position. At stumps, Pope was unbeaten on 91, while Buttler had scored 56 after opener Burns posted 57 runs. Burns' partner Dom Sibley fell for a duck in the first over to Kemar Roach, who took 2 wickets, while Roston chased, bagged 1. The 3-match series is evenly poised at 1-1. In football, Paris Saint-Germain beat 10-man Saint-Etienne by 1-0 to win their 13th French Cup. Star striker Neymar hit the winner for the Parisians in what was the first game in France after the coronavirus ended the Ligue 1 in April. The Brazilian scored on the rebound in the 14th minute after goalkeeper Jesse Merlin blocked Kylian Mbappe's shot. Saint Etienne captain Loic Perrin was sent off for a rough tackle on Mbappe, who was taken off injured in the 26th minute. About 5,000 fans were allowed inside the 80,000 theatre stade de France due to the strict health protocols. The French champions are chasing a quadruple of titles this season after securing the Ligue 1 title and the French Cup. Atalanta's Serie A title hopes have faltered after they were held to a 1-1 draw at AC Milan at the San Siro. The results leaves Atlanta 5 points adrift of leaders Juventus, who can clinch their 9th successive title if they beat Sampdoria on Sunday. Turkish winger Hakan's free kick in the 14th minute opened the scoring for the hosts. Milan's goalkeeper Gianluigi saved a Ruslan Malinovsky penalty after Ante Rebic stabbed on the Ukrainian. But Divan Zapata hit the equalizer in the 34th minute before the Rossoneri came closest to hitting a winner in the second half through Giacomo. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can log on to our website indus.news. Take care.